welcome everyone to another episode of Broken Families, where we host conversations on divorce, parental alienation, and high conflict relationships. My name is Andrew Folkler.
And I'm Barbara Pointe. Today we are going to discuss family court reform and the harm that a high conflict person can inflict on their partner during divorce. And that is why we have brought on a very special guest, Maryann Petri, to help us really dive deep into this topic. Marianne Petri was once a nurse in what seemed a happy family until one day her family fell apart during divorce. Due to the high conflict brought in by her ex, Marianne had her children taken from her and then later alienated from her. Marianne has fought back as a pro se litigant, learning case law and researching parental alienation to get her children back. She appealed to the Superior Court and emerged victorious. Today, Marianne has turned from victim to fierce advocate for parents suffering from parental alienation and for family court reform. She is also the host of the fellow podcast, Slam the Gavel, which just hit over 7,000 downloads recently, and is the author of several books, most notably Dismantling Family Court Corruption, a book that has been optioned by a producer in Canada to be made into a film. So such an honor to have you here today, Marianne.
Thank you for having me on.
Yes, you've got an incredibly riveting story, including time in jail, which is always a really interesting part for me. But let's just begin with your book. You've written a book called Dismantling Family Court Corruption. It's been optioned into a Canadian film, and it's an amazing book. So I invite you to tell us about that.
Okay, well, I had to write the book because I had so many people asking me what happened to the kids. You know, it was just like a constant thing with people. So it's like, I've got to write this book, but I put it off for about maybe 3 years because like, I don't even want to, you know, but I went downstairs, I pulled out the transcripts, kind of brainstormed for titles. So I came up with Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough. Then I sat down with the transcripts, which were disgusting. And I found even more information that I really didn't realize was happening, even though I was sitting in the courtroom having it unfold before me. Then you're reading a transcript and you're going, that actually was said. So I started writing this book. I started at 6 a.m. I didn't finish till my husband got home, which was around 6:30. And I had it done in 2 months because I just wanted it done.
That's very inspiring. What were you hoping the outcomes of your book would be?
Well, to show people what can happen to you when you are co-parenting at 50-50 shared custody, because in the beginning, we did get divorced, but we wanted to keep it out of the courts. My ex stated, I don't want to go into court. And it's like, well, I mean, I didn't even think of that to begin with. I just thought we'd just get divorced and we would do our own thing with the kids, which is what we did for a period of years until I had this great idea to introduce him to a distant acquaintance. I was not aware. I don't know if I was aware or if I knew that she worked in the courthouse. Then what happened was, in time, she inserted herself into the co-parenting relationship, dismembered it, along with the beginnings of the brainwashing of my children.
Okay, so just to clarify my understanding, so you guys were pretty amicable. You wanted to keep it out of the courts, and then you introduced your ex to this woman. They hooked up.
Oh, rather quickly, I might add. They spoke on the phone for 4 hours. Within 2 weeks, she moved in. I don't think that's right to do to kids. Kids have to adjust to a new relationship and what should be a lengthy relationship before a marriage takes place. But 7 months later, they married.
They got married, and then things went downhill for you
Very quickly.
and your children.
Yes.
Okay, so what kind of things started happening? I'm curious.
Well, this brainwashing, it's very insidious. My oldest was making denigrating comments to me. And that's like, I don't know why she's saying, I did question her, like, why would you say that? I thought she was maybe, trying to be independent. She was 10, going on 11. You kind of blow it off because you think, well, they're trying to be independent, even though I would say, don't talk to me like that. Or why would you say that? And I really didn't get an answer out of her. So it just continuously snowballed. And then when I went to get married, years later, probably 4 years later, after they got married, then all hell broke loose.
Okay, so you said that things snowballed when she got involved. So your children started making some denigrating comments to you.
Mhm.
What else snowballed? Like, what exactly are you talking about?
Okay, if I had an issue with disciplining the kids, I mean, it would have to be a bad one for me to call the ex and say, hey, I'm having a problem with, this one. I didn't call him all the time because I don't, I can handle things myself, but sometimes you need male backup. You really do. I used to work on a psych unit and we always had male backup. It makes a big difference to hear the growl of a male voice. It just makes people behave.
Well, and at this point, you were amicable with your ex-husband, the father of your children. So it makes sense to me.
Right. And I was not calling him every week, maybe every 2 months or something, we'll say. Okay, so I went to call him when this woman was living in the house with him. And all of a sudden, he said hello on the phone. And then I hear her screaming her head off. I'm trying to listen to what she's saying. And then he started screaming his head off. And he's screaming that all the problems were in my house. And I'm like, it's like I didn't know what to do with all this screaming, so I hung up. I just didn't know how to handle that. It's like I can't talk to someone if I hear all the screaming. So that's what was happening, and it just deteriorated. It's like it just didn't bother calling him anymore. They talk about children growing up in fatherless homes. Well, I can tell you what happens when children grow up in motherless homes later. But there was an incident prior to my marriage where my middle son hit the youngest one. And I went to my middle son. I said, why are you doing this? You're making his life miserable. And he looked at me and he said, you goddamn right. No, I am. And I was like, whoa. And then he said, I'm going to call the police on you. And I thought, I think I'm going to beat you to it. So I called the state police and I said, I think I need some help over here. Can you send a trooper over to talk to my son?
And how old was your son, if I might ask?
He was like, they were like 10, 9 and 10.
Okay.
And again, you needed a male backup. I didn't want to put my fiance in the middle. I've always told him, just let me handle disciplining the kids. I don't want to involve you. I want them to like you. So the state trooper came over and had a good one-to-one chat with my middle son. And I can tell you it did wonders. It was night and day difference. He never hit his brother again. And it was actually miraculous, the transformation, to have a state trooper come over and give him what for.
That's very interesting. But what I'm hearing underneath that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Marianne, is that you're starting to see some behavior problems with your kids because of divorce.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then things got much worse for you and your children.
Right.
Is that true?
That is true because the younger one was displaying high anxiety, like going to school and just losing it, ending up in the counselor's office, and I would have to drive to school to talk him into calming down to go back into his classroom.
Because at this point, your divorce is less amicable. Co-parenting problems are showing up. You've got problems with your ex, behavior problems with your children because of your divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And now anxiety in your child. So you had a lot going on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That, and I would add the blame shifting as well, considering that they're essentially creating this toxic environment for the kids, and the kids are carrying that anxiety, that frustration, and all the internalized trauma within their own lives to your home and acting it out there. And as a result, they're also blaming you for that.
I'm glad you said that, because when something like this goes askew and you've got interference, it's not going to go well. And that's the dark side of 50-50 shared parenting, okay? Because this is what can happen, and there's no going back once this happens.
I actually like that you said that, because sometimes we see so many individuals advocate for a default 50-50 parenting plan, but there are some shadow sides to it, as you saw in your family.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes it can be going great, but the other spouse has to have the strength to tell to their new future wife or future husband, just stay out of it. It's working fine between me and him, or her and me. Just stay out of it, and we're just gonna keep things going as they are. And if they want to interfere, they've got to be told no, stand down.
Boundaries, but that didn't happen in your case.
No.
So what happened next, Marianne?
Well, I'll kind of fast forward into getting into an argument with the oldest, who is almost going to be 17. And what happened was, there were issues we were arguing about that these are normal family issues. However, she chose to go live with her father. So be it. I didn't know it was going to turn into such a disaster. Dropped everybody off at school, and I did not know that was going to be the last time I would be seeing her. Within couple hours, I received a phone call from CPS wanting to come over to my home in a couple hours. And stupidly, I said, sure, come on over. When I should have said, no, you're not coming over. I'm going to call my attorney. And that's where things really went haywire.
So powerful lesson. You didn't know that back then. You were just doing the best you could. And just a little foreshadowing, you've actually got a federal lawsuit happening with CPS right now, correct?
Correct.
So CPS calls you up. What happened next? Because that's very serious.
Oh, well, it just got, it was crazy, because my parents were there, because they usually ate with us on Tuesdays. And so she came through the door, and the first words out of her mouth were, if you're indicated for emotional child abuse, you will lose your job as a registered nurse. And that was a huge red flag, where I should have said, out, calling the attorney now. And my parents had taken my youngest to the park or the thrifty shop, or I don't know where they took him, because they wanted her to, I guess, interview me. And luckily, my husband was laid off, so he could be a witness to the nuttiness of the screaming this caseworker was going to put me through.
Are you saying that the CPS worker screamed at you?
Oh, she was screaming at me at the top of her lungs. Do you know how when your ears ring when you're hearing such a loud noise? Yeah. And I'm looking at my husband, and he's looking at me like, what do we do with her? And what we should have done is said, out, get out. And the thing was, she's sitting there screaming, do you hate your ex more than you love your kids? And I'm trying to process this, going, because it's like, I've never been screamed at like that since I've worked on a psych unit. Usually mental patients scream at you like that because they're not getting their way or something's gone wrong. You know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, so she probably said that 4 times to me, and then I'm going, okay. Then she changed the subject into a pension fund. She started divulging financial information that only she would be able to get from my ex-husband. She really didn't discuss the oldest leaving my home or why or what that problem was. She barely touched on it. Okay, so she talked about that pension fund and why I was unhappy with my child support amount, which was like, wait a minute, I thought we were supposed to be discussing children here. And why are we discussing money? It's really none of her business. She barely even asked my husband, who was sitting there, any questions. She really basically only asked him where he worked or what he did and what he did for a living. And then about 2 hours later, my parents came back and then she left and she did not interview them at all.
Maryann and Andrew, you guys can boot me later if I should know this, but I'm still trying. I just wanted to confirm, how did CPS come into your home? So did your husband call them? Was it because your daughter left? Why was CPS there in your house?
That, and that's what an attorney said to me. An attorney said to me, who would call CPS on a kid that's almost 17? Yeah, it's, I guess he did it because he did not want to pay child support, which wasn't much, believe me. It was only $300 a month. This was not a staggering amount of child support.
That's not a lot. I mean, yeah, it's a subjective thing, but child support is fairly low in North America overall.
However, what he really, really wanted, and why taking the kids was not enough, was that he wanted to turn the tables so that I would have to pay him child support in the amount of $1,000 a month on top of arrears.
I guess then what was the outcome of that CPS visit?
The outcome was she left and then she came back 2 days later to scream at me some more. And then the weird part was I get a call from my counselor who says, you have to be at my office on this date, time. Apparently the caseworker wants to tell you you're indicated, and she wants you to be in a safe place so you don't commit suicide, which she and I both had a good laugh over because we knew I wasn't gonna do anything like that, and we knew this was gonna happen. So we all went into the office. This was 2 weeks before Christmas. She came into my home mid-December, where she said it would take 9 months to decide on a case. Well, she had it done within 3 weeks. So we sat there and I did record it. I held up my cell phone and I said, I'm recording everyone. And then she said, well, I want to let you know you're being indicated for emotional child abuse. I said, well, we'll see ya, and she left the room. And I was kind of yelling at her. And she swung open the door, looked at my counselor and said, that woman lives better than I do. She ran down the hall and I said, have a Merry Christmas, as she slammed the door.
So just to confirm and clarify, you're upstanding American citizen. You're a fantastic mom. You have a professional occupation as a nurse. At times you were a psychiatric nurse. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you have CPS in your life and they're accusing you of emotional child abuse?
Yes, yes.
It might be hard to go back and touch base on how you felt, but how did you feel when CPS knocked on your door, you're in the office? What kind of emotions were emerging for you in that moment?
A parent is placed in so much shock and disbelief because it's like, hey, I've only had one speeding ticket in my whole life. I've been a good mother. There's no reason any of this should be happening. You go to correct your own child and they run and call CPS on you. Okay. Because several months earlier, the oldest and we were arguing and things weren't going her way. So she stated, well, I'm going to call a judge. And I thought, what was that?
Do you think that a lot of those, you could say, sucker punches, in a sense, were part of that alienation programming from her, from your ex?
Yes. Yes. But you don't realize it because it's so insidious. You're going, "This can't really," I mean, you try to talk to this young person and, what is going on. They're not really giving you any answers. It's really sad.
Did you
Yeah.
even know what parental alienation was at that point in time?
When that happened, I did not know, but I found out about it within, maybe 3 or 4 months, where I found myself in a family courtroom, and the lies were coming out, and the silver bullet of she's mentally ill, and, you had the father crying crocodile tears on the stand that he just wants his children to be safe, and I'm thinking to myself, "If anyone kept them safe, it was me. If anyone worked really super hard at keeping them safe, it was me."
Just to jump in again and confirm, at this point, he's trying to remove custody of your children?
Oh, he did very quickly, very well. He did that very well because the judge and his opposing attorney had worked together in a capacity in the courthouse for a number of years. So when they went to pick their attorney, they kind of knew who to pick, and I think because of the wife working in the courthouse.
Back to the beginning of the story.
Mhm, mhm, and, this judge was very also round and round in circles, just like the caseworker. He would talk about the pension fund, then he's talking about custody, then he's talking about child support, which is not in his realm. I was like, um, "Can we just stick to one topic?" Then he puts the caseworker on the stand, and she's continuously calling me, the target parent, a perpetrator. The perpetrator said this. The perpetrator is fixated on that, and she must have used fixated, I think, 30 times. I think I counted it in the transcript, and I think we were up to almost 30 times.
Wow.
Sounds like just a lot of targeting language,
Yeah.
and to, in a sense, paint that false image of you and pretty much tear away your reputation,
Mm.
um, despite the fact that they never even got to know you in the first place.
Mhm, mhm. Now, I had always heard that the judge will side with the CPS worker regardless of what anybody says. They just err to the side of caution and side with the CPS worker. But there was more to it, as I had said, than that. It was really weird because, when he announced that the father would take sole custody, the entourage, which was his ex-wife, and she had her whole family there, the grandparents were there. There was whooping, clapping, and cheering in the courtroom that they won. And I looked at my lawyer and, she looked at me because we couldn't believe this was happening. And then as, we were trying to leave, we wanted them to get out first. But in the hallway, we saw the ex's wife crying her eyes out in the hallway. And my lawyer said, "What does she have to be crying about?" I said, "I don't know." And I didn't get to say goodbye to my kids. It was my day to pick them up at school, and they were probably looking for my car. They were probably looking for me, and here the ex-wife shows up to pick them up and break the news to them that I'm sure she told them I was crazy and that they weren't going to see me probably again. I don't know what she told them.
I mean, how did you survive that, Maryann?
Luckily, I had a very good family doctor, and I told him, I said, "This is going on." And, um, also what was going on at the same time is when you're indicated with emotional child abuse over here in the States, you're not allowed to hold a job that deals with children. So I was placed on suspension by the ER because I couldn't work there because, kids come in there. And so I couldn't work. I told my doctor, I've got anxiety, high anxiety, depression. I want to see this psychiatrist. And he said, oh, that's a good one. Go see him. And he put me on an anti-anxiety and antidepressant, thank God, which helped get me through this. And because what happened next was, what I didn't know was, I get a letter in the mail from domestic relations saying that I owed so much money. I'm going, what is this? And so I called up the ladies down there at the desk in domestic relations, and they said, oh, him? Yeah, he's the one. As soon as he got that judge's order the same day, he came down here and filed for child support on you. And they were laughing.
Wow.
I said, oh, okay, I get it now. And I said, I don't know how to pay this because I don't have a job. I said, I'm on suspension until, because my lawyer had to file an adjudication in front of a CPS judge that to clear your name so you can go back to work. Okay, so that took months and months. And unbeknownst to me, in the meantime, they placed a second indication of emotional abuse, which I really didn't know about until months later. Now, when I was exonerated of the first emotional abuse indication, which was like June 5th, I was cleared and I called work and I said, hey, I can come back to work. This is great. And so within 4 days, I get a phone call from a caseworker who was very abrasive and nasty on the phone, stating right away that I was indicated for emotional abuse charges on the middle one. And I said, what are the charges? She said, well, you wouldn't let him ride his bike around the block and you took away his Xbox. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, they took the kids away in like March, it's still snowing. How could you ride your bike in the snow? Second of all, I didn't have the kid to take his Xbox away. I'm trying to think of when could I have taken away his Xbox?
So you still had a charge there.
Another charge.
Still had another charge.
Yeah. So I had to call work back and tell them I couldn't work.
Oh my gosh. Plus you lost custody of your kids and now you had to pay child support to your husband.
Yes. And believe me, he's vice president of a company. He did not need the money. He already destroyed me. I mean, why taking the kids was not enough. He's already destroyed everything. So what happened was, see, in the state of Pennsylvania, I don't know if you know what happened in the scandal of Penn State and Sandusky. I believe it was Commonwealth versus Sandusky. And that created that when you're indicated with any child abuse charges, you cannot work in a job with children. Okay. That's what evolved. And it's kind of odd that happened around the time all this was happening. Okay. So the hospital said everyone has to have their fingerprints in, background check, and child abuse clearances in by November 23rd. And I'm thinking, well, I can get the other ones in, but I can't get the child abuse clearance in because I didn't have an adjudication with a CPS judge until December 4th. So I was involuntarily terminated from my job as a nurse. Without unemployment, I may add, because I tried to get unemployment, but because there was an indication, you're guilty until proven innocent. So you're not going to get your unemployment if they already think you're guilty.
You've gone through a lot, Marianne. That's a lot. Wow, I don't even know how you were still standing up.
I have very good close friends that I could talk to that knew the game. Some of them didn't know the game, but they totally understood. And I kept my circle kind of small as to who I talked to because people don't get it.
So Marianne, what happened next? Because I know at one point you went to jail.
Oh, yes. See, this is where it gets, okay. So get this, I'm under that second indication. And the judge, we went before the judge again, and he let me have the kids every other weekend, overnights, unsupervised. When he said that, the opposing side and their entourage flipped out screaming their heads off. They were so angry. And we were like, I'm under an emotional child abuse indication, and this judge is giving me unsupervised visits, overnight stays. However, that made me a non-custodial parent, and I still had to pay this child support. So to fast forward to the prison thing, what happens is, you get called in for support conferences, which turn into enforcement of child support conferences, which turn into enforcement hearings. And I had no idea. I found myself, and this is like Holy Week of Easter, and I was in a box, like where the jury would sit. And I was with a bunch of guys. And the guy next to me said, I don't know why I'm here. My child support's all caught up. I don't even know why I'm here. I'm going, I know why I'm here. So at this point, I owed, I don't know, maybe 12 grand in arrears. And so there were also two men in the front. They were shackled at the waist and at the ankles. Like, really, where are they going to go? And so, I waited till 9 o'clock. The judge, she was female. She came out in her, and I would have to say, demonic flying robes. And she called my name first. And of course, I'm sitting in the back. So I had to squeeze around these guys, and I touched each guy on the shoulder, and I said, God bless you. God bless you. And even the guys that were cuffed, God bless you. And I hope she heard me. But I stood there, and she said, if you can come up with $2,000, I won't send you to she called it jail. But if you don't come up with the $2,000 in 1 month, I'm going to send you to jail for 2 months. And I'm thinking to myself, okay. My ex-husband at that point ran up to the rail, started yelling to the judge that I have been defiant in paying my child support when I had no job.
I guess it depends on where you're sitting. Some people might feel 12,000 is a lot. Some people might feel it's a little bit. But you had 3 children?
Well, in the book it says 4. And technically, I truthfully had 4 kids. I did have a miscarriage. But I just did that to throw people off.
You paid child support for three kids, right?
Yeah.
So do you mind me asking how much you were ordered to pay a month? $1,000 or?
Yes, 1,000. And then on top of that, yeah. And bear in mind, he was only paying 300. Okay. Then what the judge did at that time when she was ordering this ridiculous amount, she also increased my arrears from 12,000 to 15,000. And this is called extortion. I'm going, how do we go from 12,000? Now I owe 15,000. Now I'm going to end up going to, however, remember that pension fund. Remember that pension fund that CPS caseworker knew all about. Luckily, I had an attorney that fought that in Superior Court because the judge thought that the pension fund wasn't worth anything. Well, it was. It was actually worth $2,200. That would have kept me out of jail had the ex paid it, but he just never did.
I think it's also important to note, especially within the U.S., you can't default on child support payments, and so you can't. And I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but most people within this atmosphere know that as common knowledge. But listeners who might not be in this kind of hurricane of a mess, you can't default on child support payments.
Mm-hmm. Good point, Andrew. And it is the same in Canada as well. So if I didn't know anything about this and I didn't know anything at all, to be honest with you, I would want to ask, I don't know if any of our audience feels this way, why is your husband doing this to you? It just seems so cruel. At this point, the system had taken over, but he seemed to really be cheerleading them on.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in fact, the night before I had to go to that contempt hearing I did email him and I said, look, call off the dogs. It's not going to be good for the kids if I go to prison. It's just not going to be good for them. I wouldn't be doing this to you. And truthfully, I would never even dream of sending the ex to prison. And it is prison because that's what it said on the wall as the bus drove by. And I was in the paddy wagon with a bunch of guys. And yeah, so this is how people are treating each other, all for the sake of the God Almighty dollar. And and the thing that my counselor had pointed out was that it seems like it's a vendetta. The child support judge really had it out for you in some weird way. She said she's seen her act crazy before, but not this crazy. And she also said his attorney has something personal against you. He doesn't like you, and he really wants you to, you know, it's just kind of weird how he's going after you, really, in a very disturbing way, which revealed itself after I got out of prison. Okay, so I was only in there for 5 days, thank God, because I got very sick in there. You cannot take a patient off benzodiazepines as it is life-threatening. That's a human rights violation to not get your medications in prison. It's happening all over the world, not just me. Okay. And I was put in the general population where the ex told the kids that I would be, you know, playing tennis and knitting like Martha Stewart was. And Wolf of Wall Street. And it's like, no, I was in the general population, people.
Were you afraid for your safety?
No, I wasn't. Believe it or not, there were a lot of very spiritual, kind women in there, and they kept us away from the murderers. So you'd eat your lunch, and then you'd be put back in your cell. Then they'd let the murderers come out and let them eat. Then they would go back to their cell.
Did you get to play tennis?
Oh, no. Actually, I was really disappointed with all the funding for prisons that there was not even a sewing machine. Like, really? I mean, you can't make this stuff up. You cannot. In fact, there was one inmate, she was complaining about my ex's attorney. She said he took my retainer fee and he represented me once, and then I tried calling him and he never returned my phone calls. And I said, you know what? That's how he works. I said, I know the guy. This is what he does.
Marianne, I really agree with you. You can't make this stuff up, and we can laugh about it now. It's been years, and some small parts are healed parts of your story. But is it true that you had some heart issues in prison?
Well, I was having chest pain. I was sweating. I had back pain as well. And I went up to the nurse who was passing out everybody else's pills. And I said, can I go to the ER? Like I'm having chest pain. And the guard looked over and said, we don't do that here. I'm thinking, dear God, don't let me die in here. And so what had also happened was I had started vomiting. I really won't go deep into that. That's already in the book, but I got so sick. I had to call my 72-year-old father and ask him for $2,000, which was called a purge amount. $2,000. And I told him how to do it. And don't leave the area till they fax it over to the prison. Then come and get me. And he did that and got into the car. And the first thing I said is, let's go to McDonald's. I need some serious food. Something that smelled good. Not with like 2 hot dogs sitting in oatmeal. Seriously, really? Yeah. And so then, when I got out and my son said, what happened? I said, well, I just want, they had asked if I was playing tennis. And I said, no, I was in the general population, and they were shocked. It's like, I hope they can see in time how much they have been lied to. Then months had gone on. And again, here we go with the support contempt hearings, more support contempt hearings, trying to explain to the judge, there's no job I can get, would not be hired back as a nurse. And now my nursing license is revoked because I was so upset, scattered. I just couldn't concentrate from all of this upheaval in our lives that my counselor said, you know, you were a safe nurse at one time, but with all this happening, I don't think you're safe right now. So I'm going to have the state pull your license. I'm going, I can't work. What, just a minimum wage hour job? Well, the judge wasn't happy with that. But when we went in for a support contempt conference, I was handing off all these papers to the conference officer, and the ex's attorney showed up. And he showed up at the right time because I said, here's the paper that says my nursing license has been revoked. His jaw dropped. He said, I didn't know that happened. And I looked up at him and I said, right. And you know that paperwork I filed to the Superior Court, if that fails, we're just going to go over and do it again. I'm just going to appeal again. And so I just handed off all the paperwork, and the officer took my paperwork and I got up and left. So the attorney was right behind me. He was 4 paces behind me. He says, and I was so honored. He says to me, I hate her. She argues like my ex-wife. And I was like, that's like the best compliment I have ever gotten in my life. Okay. Because she's an awesome attorney. I've heard of his ex-wife. She's awesome. So then the heart attack happened, and that scared the judge. She even told my ex to stop coming in for these contempt hearings because she's probably tired of him going on about it. And then Christmas happened. 2 days after Christmas, I get in the mail from the Superior Court that I had won my case on the child support, because I had to have that reduced so she wouldn't be sending me into prison every 3 months, because this would be going on as a revolving door, you see. So I told my husband, I said, well, we won, but we have to take it back to the lower court. And I said, I have to be honest, I can't defend myself alone as a pro se. I'm not healthy and I'm still having chest pain. So we hired a Supreme Court attorney, and she cost just as much as everybody else, but she was awesome. She really, she actually said to the judge when we got in there, she said to the judge, you have to abide by what the Superior Court ruled. And it was like total silence in that courtroom. And then every time his attorney opened his big fat mouth, the judge would say overruled. And every time my attorney spoke, she was sustained. I'd never seen anything like it, ever. And, you know, I just said, we need to see what his W-2s are doing. So the judge asked for those. And then, like, he didn't want to hand them over, but he did. However, you know, we had to wait for her order, which was, we got it like, I think it was like a week and a half later. And my attorney called me. She said, I have never seen an order written so crazy like this. But now you owe $109 a month with $9 in arrears. I said, oh, she said, really? She said, honestly, I wanted it all wiped away. That's what really should have happened. And that's what she said, that is her intention, that she wanted this judge to wipe it all away because none of it should have happened to begin with.
You must have incurred quite an amount of legal fees, I would imagine, through this process.
Close to $45,000. Now, I know of people that have spent way more, but I knew when to start representing myself, whether I liked it or not, whether I knew the laws or not, I did my best. But, you know, the heart attack was not something that was a normal heart attack. The cardiologist said, you're thin, your cholesterols are perfect. What had happened was my left anterior descending artery started to dissect, which means it starts ripping and opening up. And that's very painful, I can tell you. But that only happens in cases of stress. So the cardiologist told me this was caused by stress. What was going on in your life? I told him. He said, that's what caused this.
Makes sense to me that you went through an incredible amount of duress over a long period of time on so many fronts, emotional, financial. your kids. And now, like in this present moment though, you're quite a fierce advocate for family court reform, correct?
Yes. And, I thought about reform, and then I thought it just should be completely abolished and just take it back down to civil court. And these judges have to know that if parents are coming in to litigate and fight over the kids, they have to know that there is a person with a personality disorder that's doing all the litigating. And I actually proved that to the judge. I said, he's been pulling me in here more than I pulled him in here. That's a pattern. But bear in mind, they were BFFs. So, that wasn't going to work. So, these judges have to discern that this is not normal, get down to the root of it, and end it within a month, and not drag out these court cases for 6 to 8 months and messing with the kids. It's just got to stop.
You were dragged to court a lot. So looking back now, would you say your ex is a high conflict personality in your experience?
He is, I would say, since I didn't get to see his psych eval, okay, because his psych eval was done by a CPS counselor. Okay, so that's a conflict of interest. He should have been doing that. I had to pay $400 for a psychological evaluation, which came out pristine. Okay, there's no reason. I was not a danger to my kids. Okay, but I don't know what his says, but it's probably all rainbows and unicorns. So he, in my opinion, if I was going to diagnose anyone, and I'm not a psychiatrist and I'm not a psychologist, but EAD, explosive anger disorder, oppositional defiant, borderline personality disorder, and I would have to say malignant narcissism. If I was going to diagnose, that's probably what I would say. The thing was, it just still didn't end, even though I was cleared of all this. And I went to the DA because years ago, after they were shortly married thereafter, she had called me up. The ex's wife had called me up, and we were talking on the phone, and then she says, I know a lot of people in the courthouse, and I'm friends with all the judges. And I'm thinking, I don't know what to think about that. 2 months later, they're on my front porch over some, I don't know what we were arguing about, flower pots. I think that's what it was. But she said, I know a lot of people in the courthouse, and I'm friends with all the judges. So years later, I go to the DA and I tell him this. And he said, well, did you tell her boss? I said, well, I didn't know what to think of it at the time because I had so much going on. He said, well, her boss's name is so-and-so. Why don't you write him a letter? So I did. Then I go to pick up my kids, and the one was crying, saying, if she loses her job, we're going to lose the house. And it's like, well, they wanted us to lose our house. That's all I could respond. I said, that's not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. But that's what, he just used the kids. He just used them.
Gotcha. And leading up to where things are at now, how are things now, considering we're getting close to that 1 hour mark?
Okay. Well, since I had been through all of this, I contacted, Human Services, and I said, do I have a lawsuit? Can I sue? And the guy said, send me your paperwork. I did. He said, yes, go ahead. So I filed it in the federal court, which furthermore upset the other kid. The youngest will speak to me, but the other two won't. And the middle one got upset. He's very easy to manipulate. So that's how he was gotten by the father and the stepmother, because he had told me himself that they were constantly bad mouthing me over there at the house. So I had to do this because I have to hold these people accountable. If I don't hold them accountable, that means they're going to go down the street and do that to someone else. And as a mandated reporter, as I was as a nurse, I am going to report this. And what has happened is the federal court judge just didn't read the exhibits. He even said he didn't read the exhibits, and he ruled them as irrelevant. Maybe he should have read them, because now we're in the appellate court. So they have all the paperwork. It's in their hands. And I pray that those judges will do the right thing.
we'll definitely keep tabs on that, because I think it would definitely be really good to bring you back on board again and discuss more about that advancement in that case. Because, like you said, I think family court reform, or even just dismantling it altogether, that won't happen without accountability.
Right.
And I think that's one thing that happens up to a lot of people who are victims in family court, is they've been beaten down so much. They've been hurt by their ex, by family court, their attorneys, and everyone else who usually just doesn't quite understand what's going on and take everything at face value. And it gets to the point where they allow their voice to be erased or silenced.
Right. And I'm going to keep going with this as far as I can with this. And I know they had talked about sanctioning me, monetary sanctions. Like, well, if you want to, I don't know, monetary sanction me, all I have is $14 in my checking account. So, can't help you there. But I'm the wounded victim here. They are not. They have to be held accountable.
Marianne, given everything you've gone through in family court, and how many years of your life have you spent doing this in total?
I would say since 2012. My math is super bad.
It's getting close to 10 years. I mean, we're halfway through 2021 now, or a little bit more than halfway through 2021.
Yeah.
I think we're getting pretty close to 10 years now. I mean, and given that the divorce journey doesn't really start once the papers are filed, I think it starts even before. I think it's safe to round it up to 10 years.
Right. And what I didn't know also was that came out in the transcript as I was reading it, is they had been making calls to CPS even as far as 2011, 2012, but the calls were being blown off. They weren't taking the calls seriously, probably until they found the right caseworker that would do the job.
I think what you've gone through with CPS is incredibly relevant, because there's thousands and thousands of parents in the USA that face CPS and have some pretty awful outcomes with CPS and the corruption of CPS.
What I'm grateful for is the letter my attorney wrote that said, I do believe you were unfairly targeted by CPS.
That's significant.
Yes. Yes.
Wow. Well, CPS, wow, that's very significant. So, I mean, you must have some closing advice for parents around CPS, around family court reform. What would be some advice or counsel that you'd want to share, or top reform tips?
Okay, do not let them in. If a CPS caseworker calls you and says, I want to come over at 3:00, I say, no, I'm going to call an attorney. That should be your answer. I mean, I couldn't afford it. I'll be honest with you. I was racking up charge cards. Okay. Because I mean, we're talking 8,000 on a charge card, but it helped me get exonerated from 2 emotional abuse indications. So at least I'm not lumped in with a bunch of child molesters and child abusers, things like that. I mean, you got to do what you have to do, but do not let them in your house.
Okay, don't let them in. Call your attorney. Do you have any other advice with respect to CPS?
Let your attorney handle them.
Okay.
Great. I mean, if I could do it over again, that's what I would have done.
I think that those are 3 powerful, powerful tips for people dealing with CPS. You've just gone through like so much with family court, and you advocate for family court reform. So do you have something to say about family court reform, things you'd like to see in terms of actual reform, or tips for others dealing with family court, whatever you want to throw out there?
Okay, if we can't abolish it, put video cameras in there and tamper-proof mics. And that way, this can be pulled up if there's an appeal, so those judges can see how those judges behaved. Things can be pulled up. Okay, and they also need to see what's going on in the pews in the back, like the whooping, clapping, and cheering. That's not normal. It's not normal behavior. And an attorney told me that. So we've got to at least do that. We are and should be allowed to have juries. And I was just told by a guest that, in some states, you can request a jury if you're going to get your kids taken away. But those are in different states. I don't know the laws of those states.
But just generally speaking.
Yes.
And that's the tough part, given there's 50 different ways that, depending on where you live geographically in the United States. I mean, state laws do differ a great deal. So I imagine that would pose a lot of difficulty. And so really definitely make sure whoever's listening, if you're caught in this kind of situation, do as much research as you can on your state laws.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
And likewise for Canada and anywhere else in the world, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when I heard that you could have a jury, it's like, gee, I didn't know that as a pro se litigant, because all I've ever known is family court, and no one else, no one's allowed in there except whoever. He took an entourage of 12 people. I just had my parents. My friends worked full time. Who else was it? Who could I get in there to, be a court watcher?
Yeah, you must have been overwhelmed with things to do and all of the pressure and what was at stake.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, so much at stake, so much time lost.
Any parting advice for parents that are suffering from parental alienation? Marianne, you know a lot about it.
Well, get a good counselor. I mean, if you find one you don't like, keep searching for the right one. Just because one counselor didn't work doesn't mean the other one won't. Just find someone that you can totally mesh with, that gets it and understands it. And because you need someone to talk to if you don't have friends that don't understand this.
Marianne, if listeners wanted to reach out to you or learn more about you, what would be the best way for them to do so?
They can contact me on Dismantling Family Court Corruption.com.
Right on. And just as a quick reminder, you're also the host of Slam the Gavel podcast. Both Barbara and I have been featured on it, and I think you pump out a lot more episodes than we do. But it's definitely a great resource for any of the listeners who are watching this video. But yeah, once again, everyone, that's all we have time for today. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our channel, either on YouTube or to our podcast through the various podcasting platforms. Don't forget, we summarize everything that we talked about in a downloadable document below. It'll be on Barbara's website at barbaraLapointe.com/podcast. And this will help you and your loved ones deal with these challenges, trauma, and high conflict. If listeners wanted to reach out to you, what would be the best way for them to do so?
Barbara at barbaraLapointe.com.
Right on. So definitely give her an email if you need to reach out to her, especially if you need counseling during these kind of high conflict divorce situations. If you want to ask me anything, you're free to reach me at email. You're free to email me at startnow@andrewfolkler.com. As always, thank you for taking the time to be with us, everyone, at the Broken Families podcast, where we discuss and help you find solutions to divorce, parental alienation, and high conflict relationships. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.
Marianne.
Thank you.